We're 25% of the way through 2024. This month I was able to see 12 new releases, so it's time to stop and rank every March new movie that I saw from the worst to the best. While I'm talking, be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Let me know what was your favorite movie of March and what was your least favorite movie of March. And if I missed a movie that you think I would like, let me know about it down below in the comment section, and let's get started. Last, Dogman. This is actually a film that I saw last September at Fantastic Fest. It was a secret screening. I went into the movie without knowing what film I was going to see, and then they announced, we're about to see Dogman. And everyone in the room was like, Dogman? What on earth is Dogman? And apparently, it's the new Luc Besson film. So back in the 90s, he did a number of really highly praised action thrillers. Then he did The Fifth Element. He was kind of behind the scenes as the producer of the Transported films, the Taken films. And then he's directed a number of films over the last decade as well. And then there's been some accusations surrounding him, so he's had very much a fall from grace. So he has a new movie coming out that none of us had seen a trailer for. None of us knew anything about. None of us knew what we were getting in, what we were in for. So when they said Dogman, I was like, Dogman, like those books that my kids read? Why is that playing at Fantastic Fest? What's going on here? No. It's this whole other thing. And to try and explain the film without spoiling it or giving away too much is very tricky. But essentially, it's about the Dogman recalling his life story, Forrest Gump style, of how he had an abusive childhood and how his dad tried to raise him with dogs in a cage with the dogs, and how he tried to discover himself through the arts, and eventually he's into drag shows, dogs, and being like a crime boss. I mean, it is all over the place. It's very peculiar. And if you watch the trailer for it, it looks like it's another Luc Besson action thriller, but it's really not. There's just this one action sequence at the end of the film that the action sequence is pretty fun because it's, kind of like Home Alone with guns and dogs in a warehouse. So I enjoyed that action sequence, but I just don't know what he was going for with this movie. I didn't get it. It's just too many different things that I did not connect with until dogs and guns started murdering people. And then that was quite a bit of fun. The lead guy absolutely goes for it, gives a great performance in a movie that I just don't get it. Then after the movie ended, they did a Q&A with Luc Besson, who wasn't in the room, but they were trying to live stream with him while he was in the streets of Paris in front of a famous landmark, and they couldn't get the tech to work. So we're just staring at him for 5 minutes while he's like, is it working? Is it working? Is it working? And while we're in the theater, the people I was hanging out with, some of my Fantastic Fest friends, we started hearing crickets in the wall. It was just a bizarre day. I didn't enjoy the movie much. It's not one I have any plans to rewatch, but it was an eventful, fun night and a interesting surprise. Number 11, Imaginary. I missed this one in the theaters because a little bit too much was kind of going on this past month, but I was able to watch it last night because it's dropped on digital rentals. And from the trailers, I actually was a little bit hopeful that this one could be a slightly above average Blumhouse horror film. The lead actress in it, she was in Jurassic World Dominion, which isn't necessarily a great film, but I thought that she was really great in it. And I was looking forward to seeing her in more things. She was starring in this film. And just the idea of an imaginary friend that's a killer, I think there's a lot of potential there. And unfortunately, all the pieces of this movie I just don't think really came together. In the last 20-ish minutes where it really goes for it and it starts playing around with the idea of imagination and things like that and puts all of its cards on the table, I started to get a little bit more into it because it became interesting and it was different and they were kind of playing around with ideas a little bit. There's something new there. But unfortunately, for the first hour of the film, it's a movie called Imaginary that just doesn't have a lot of imagination. I mean, it's generic stepmom drama with kids and jump scares, typical things you hear a noise over here, a person looks over here, and then they turn back and then it jumps at, like, it's all that stuff. It's the usual bag of tricks. You watch enough movies, you can even predict exactly when the jump scares are going to happen based off which direction someone turns and where the director's trying to make you look. That means it's going to come from the other side. Hide cinematic sleight of hand for a jump scare. And so, and the as typical in these deals when they're trying to overcook the family drama, the stepdaughter, the older one, is just insufferable. So pretty disappointed by the first 2/3 of the movie, and the last third wasn't, it was almost what I wanted it to be, but still not enough to save the film. If you're going to call your movie imaginary, it needs to have a lot of imagination. And if you're going to make imagination such a commodity in your film itself, you really need to do something with that. You're promising something there, and the movie just doesn't really deliver on it. Bringing us into the top 10, Damsel. This is the new Millie Bobby Brown dragon movie where she marries a guy, she thinks it's all good, and then it turns out she's just being married to be sacrificed to a dragon. And as this damsel in distress has to find her way out of the situation. It's basically Ready or Not with Samara Weaving from a few years back, the radio silence movie with dragons. That's what the film is. And just kind of lacking some of the personality that Ready or Not had. My wife loves dragon movies, and she actually really enjoys Millie Bobby Brown films. Like, the reason we got an Enola Holmes 2 is because my wife watched Enola Holmes 1 so many times late at night. When I'd go upstairs to watch a horror movie, and she'd stay downstairs and watch Enola Holmes. So the idea of Millie Bobby Brown battling a dragon, that's right up her alley. In fact, like, she's watched it. She watched it 2 times in the same night. We watched it. I went upstairs to go watch a horror movie. She stayed downstairs and watched it a second time. And so that's what my household has looked like recently. As for me in this movie, it just, I just don't think it ever really came to life. Like, the mechanics of you could tell what they were trying to set up, of everyone's being manipulated, and so we have to get our revenge. It just didn't come together. There's nothing really exciting or fresh here because it is very much a type of story we've seen before. She thinks she's getting a princess wedding. It turns out it's a nightmare. And so maybe in the last, when you start getting the payoff, the revenge, the team up, okay, some of that started to work a little bit. But when we're just like wandering around caves trying not to die, this like the main thing of the film, that stuff just never really worked for me. Next up, Immaculate. I was actually at the world premiere of this movie at South by Southwest. Coincidentally, I was sitting in the front row. Most movies, when you sit in the front row, that's a really bad thing. However, if you're at the world premiere and the lead actress of the film does a Q&A afterwards and she's standing 10 feet away from you, that's pretty fun. Also, they had kind of this whole parade of these nuns that came in and singing. It was creepy. It was weird. It's a nice way to do a world premiere, and I had a front row seat for the whole deal. As for the movie itself, I'm not typically into movies like this. I've been very open about the fact that I really don't like The Nun, movies from The Conjuring, and obviously this is a very different type of film, but this version of religious horror, it just isn't the stuff that gets me particularly excited. It's not really anything like that for me. And for the first 2/3 of this movie, 60%, something like that, it was very much exactly what I feared it would be, which was all of the cliches of this nun has something bad to her, creepy things happening, something's not as it should be. And every time someone turns around, there's a jump scare. And even the central premise of the film is basically, after a wild night of jump scares, a nun ends up pregnant. It even does the bird one, like the most overplayed horror jump scare. Someone looks out a window and a bird crashes into the window and dies. It does that in this movie. Then it reveals kind of what's going on. I was like, okay, here we go. Now, all right, this is getting weird and wacky enough. All right, gotcha. Okay, this is kind of interesting. Third act, very much my kind of thing of it turns up into like, she turns the tables, revenge. So it's set up so well. You're angry with everyone. You want her to burn the whole place down or whatever. And it goes for it. And then the last 2 minutes is like this mixed bag of great performance from Sydney. Appreciate that they went for it and that they chose something that actually elicits a response. Whether you love it or you hate it, you'll have a response to the end of this film. But as the credits started rolling, I was like, I don't know if I just respect that it so went for it or that I'm just deeply offended at where it went with it. So one of those movies that was like, all right, cool. In particular, because I was at the world premiere in the front row, that was a cool experience watching the movie. This is not one that I'm going to like re-explore on my own. Today's video is brought to you by BetterHelp. If you don't know my story, when I started my YouTube channel, I was unemployed and in alcohol addiction treatment. And my addiction issues came about because I just had a tremendous amount of stress in my life, and I coped with that stress through drinking. I wish 10 years ago I had turned to therapy instead of alcohol. Therapy could have helped me develop proper coping skills for all the stress that I was facing. And it could have helped me steer my life away from really toxic patterns. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Sean Chandler today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Sean Chandler. Ricky Stanicky. This is a new star-studded R-rated comedy with John Cena and Zac Efron. It's an Amazon Prime movie, and it very much feels like the sort of comedy we got all the time like 15 years ago, but we just don't get as many of these films anymore. It's from one of the Farrelly brothers, and it feels like a Farrelly Brothers movie from decades past. And because of the star power involved here, and that these are actors that can be very funny, there are absolutely moments in this film that make you laugh out loud. There's plenty of like obnoxious scenarios that I had a good time in the theater. It didn't really leave much of a mark though. So like I left like, okay, that made me laugh. Okay, a little cringy at times. And the way that it tries to kind of have a character arc and pull things together as a method to like, end on like a happy note for a movie that's all about lying. It feels very disingenuous. It feels like, no. There's been a lot of really bad behavior in this film, and we're just kind of like shrugging it off. There has to be more than that after everything that these guys did. So, like one of those movies that if you just kind of watch it in passing with no expectations, it'll put a smile on your face, but just don't expect a whole lot more than that. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Now, the first Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey was my least favorite movie from last year. I just thought it was a totally generic slasher with a cheap Winnie the Pooh skin wrapped around it. They had one good idea on how to exploit copyright public domain, and then just didn't have much creativity with the script or anything beyond that. This, however, is like the Citizen Kane of Pooh movies. Now, is that saying that this is actually a good movie, or is that the equivalent of saying that this is the best dog Pooh I've ever seen? Or Winnie Pooh that I've ever seen? Well, I mean, it's better on every single level. The script is better. There's an actual story this time where there's some mystery, intrigue, twists, turns, reveals. There's a backstory given. There's a lot more kills. In fact, in the end of the movie, there's total carnage candy that unfolds. There's more inventiveness with the kills. So, I mean, when you get into this one, you're still watching a movie that exists to like exploit public domain characters, but it's a much better low-budget slasher, with a much better Winnie the Pooh skin wrapped around it, with more attempts to tie back into the lore. So I had a much better time with this film. Obviously, it's not even at the bottom of this list, so it's not going to be in my bottom 10 of the year. I had fun with it. I still think it took itself too seriously. They needed to lean more into the Pooh-isms, and they didn't. But huge improvement. Credit to the people that made it for that. 6, Roadhouse. Now, I also saw this movie at its world premiere at South by Southwest, which is a really fun way to watch this movie. Jake Gyllenhaal, Colin McGregor, Post Malone, and the rest of the cast were in the movie. So anytime anything happened in the film, the theater just erupted in applause. And when you're watching a movie like this that is intentionally rowdy and filled with cheesy one-liners, plays great with the theater, I think it was a poor move to release it just to Amazon Prime, so most of you watched it laying on your couch or something like that. As for the movie itself, it's fun but forgettable. It's harmless. I think because all the changes they made to distinguish it, I think it made it less unique, where the first movie is the bouncer movie about the cooler and that whole subculture, and Dalton's this philosophy major. And so this one, him being a UFC fighter with regrets, it just feels a lot more generic, like it's just another story about the outsider coming in to save the day or whatever. So, and some of the stuff they did with the action was cool because it was up close with these wide angle lenses. I liked that, but then they also added in like CGI contact and sped some stuff up that I didn't like so much. So pretty mixed bag. Entirely watchable. I rewatched it at home with my wife because just wanted to see her reaction to it, but it's just like a throw on in the background kind of movie. 5, Godzilla X Kong, A New Empire. This is very much a follow-up to Godzilla vs. Kong. If you liked the tone of that movie, well, you get a lot more of it in this film. It kind of doubles down on everything from that film. The silliness, the one-liners, the wild, crazy characters, the exploration of Hollow Earth, and even the structure where it's like a long build-up set up for like an hour and 15 minutes, and then the last 30 minutes is just Titans duking it out, like for just going wild. So for me, there's a little bit of diminishing returns here, but still, it's a fun formula. Like, do I like to see Godzilla with a robot hand and an axe battling another Titan ape with his own whip bone thing? That is, sure, of course, that's fun to watch. Do I like watching Kong jump on Godzilla's back and sure, that's fun to watch. But it's very much a superficial and entertainment level here. It doesn't care about logic or why on earth is that robot glove? Does it happen to be right there? Well, do you want Kong to have a robot glove or not? Well, yeah, I want him to have a robot glove. Well, then shut up. Stop asking questions about why the robot glove is right there. So, it's that sort of thing. It's like ignore any sort of logic. You just have to embrace the silliness and go for it. It's the kind of movie that was a ton of fun in the theater on a double date with my wife and a couple of our friends. But, do I think it'll play the same at home? No, I don't. But, it gave me what I expected from it. Today's video is brought to you by Factor. I'm in a crazy busy period of life right now where I'm going to film festivals, Comic Cons, and trying to raise kids. Out of convenience, it's so easy to just eat junk. Eating better is easy with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, and ready to go in just 2 minutes. Factor's delicious meals are restaurant quality, and they're ready to heat and eat whenever you are. No prep, no cooking skills required, and no cleanup. You'll have over 35 different options to choose from every week, including Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. I normally go for keto because I'm a high protein, low carb kind of guy. Also, there's more than 60 add-ons to help you stay fueled up and feeling good all day long. Discover a wide variety of easy options for the entire day, like breakfast, midday bites, and more. Head to factormeals.com/SeanChandler50 and use code SeanChandler50 to get 50% off. That's code SeanChandler50 at factormeals.com/SeanChandler50 to get 50% off. Number 4, 1% Warrior. This is actually a movie that I saw last September at Fantastic Fest. At the time, it was just called 1%er. It is a Japanese martial arts film, basically about this martial arts movie star who puts out like this highly acclaimed, massive hit martial arts film, and then kind of goes crazy trying to up himself and make the greatest martial arts film of all time and developing a new fighting style to do that, and burns every bridge he has in the process of trying to make this movie, and then goes off to an island to do some scouting for the movie that he wants to make with this person that he's training. and essentially a drug deal is going down on that island. And so this guy who's been developed in this martial arts style gets put into a die-hard situation where he's trying to survive. So martial arts, die hard on an island. That's the basic idea of it. And there are some twists, some turns, some other things kind of going on with it. But if I were to give kind of those points of reference for what they were, it starts to give away spoilers for the film if you think about what I'm saying with it. But the key thing here is with a martial arts film, does it deliver a lot of action? Does it deliver interesting action? Does it have a unique style of how it does the fights? And does it do the fights in a fashion in which you can see everything that's going on? Yes to all of those. So yeah, absolutely, it's a die-hard clone or whatever if you want to. I don't really like that term, but that is the most useful way to describe it. But the guy has like a real distinct, like this fast-moving style to the way that he does his punches and the way that he works with people and this odd blend of choreography versus improvisation to where they even did demonstrations in the room. The two leads of the movie were there in the film and they started just like throwing these punches in front of everybody. It was like, whoa, like they're just doing it. This guy is really, really, really fast. And so if you like martial arts films and you want to see one that's like very watchable, is not weird or anything like that, that has a cool style to it. Look for 1% Warrior. It didn't get much of a release. It just dropped straight on streaming. The star of it was actually in this movie from like 20 years ago called Versus, where like these guys, it's like martial arts versus zombies in a forest or something like that. It was a very cool movie that I saw. I need to rewatch that one. Anyway, as for this month, I dug this film. Third, Kung Fu Panda 4. For me, this was easily the weakest of the Kung Fu Panda films, but it's such a strong franchise and such a great setup that I still think that this is a good, solid film, thus a nice placement on this list. At its core, the central idea of Poe and the characterization there, this world of animals doing Kung Fu and going on these quests, it just works and it lends itself to a bunch of different stories to tell. And so going off and having another adventure with Poe a little bit later in life, I dug it. It worked for me. Now, I think it did hurt itself by trading in the Force 5 for the Awkwafina character. I get why they did it, what they were going for, trying to put him in a new position and explore different things with him. You kind of tell that story. I think we did, the cost wasn't worth it, or they should have reevaluated, found some way to work those characters in. But if that's my biggest issue, that's fine. I thought they did some interesting things with the villain. There were some twists, turns, new scenarios and stuff like that. So it's an example of just a franchise strong enough that even the weakest film is still a good film. Our runner-up, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I was quite shocked at how polarizing this film turned out to be. I watched it and I don't think it's a great Ghostbusters film, but it's nice to be in that world. I like these characters, I like the genre, and I like that the Ghostbusters are in action from the beginning of it. We're doing this ghost investigation. I like where they took the OG Ghostbusters, a couple, how we saw them in the story and this new phase of life. And so it was fun. It's got its issues. There's too many characters. There's too many subplots. It takes a little while to get going. But overall, a nice little Ghostbusters adventure. There's a whole segment of the internet that like hates this movie. It's abysmal. It's the worst blockbuster in a decade. And I'm like sitting there scratching my head like, what movie did you watch that you think this was the worst blockbuster in a decade? Hey, I can acknowledge a lot of the flaws, and if you didn't like it, okay, you're disappointed by it. Okay, if you think, maybe this is played out, time to move on. Okay, worst blockbuster in a decade? How many movies have you watched? Like, there's some bad movies out there. So I had fun with it. I've seen it 2 times, and the second time, like, solidified my feelings. Like, yeah, it definitely has some distinct issues with the way that it's structured, and they just needed to trim some characters out of here. And it felt to me a little bit like they shot the first draft. I like the ideas, I like the characters, all that stuff I said before, but the script itself had just some kinks it needed to iron out, do the pacing a little bit better and things like that, but I dug it. But no surprise here, coming in at number 1, Dune Part 1, and there's a pretty big gap. Like, I think Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is good but flawed, and I think Dune Part 2 will probably be in my top 3 favorite movies of the year. maybe it'll be number one. That's entirely on the table. This is a great sci-fi epic that it's a truly immersive experience where every frame in the movie is believable, both on a visual sense, but also the details of the world, of how characters live, how they interact, the different factions inside the Fremen. All of it feels believable and thought out, and it's not asking you to make big, gigantic leaps. It does the hard work of earning believability. Along those same lines, it has just the right amount of like a nice sense of humor. A lot of it coming from Javier Bardem. It takes you on this like inverted hero's journey of sorts with Paul, that it has all the beats of the classic hero's journey, but it's not really exactly a hero's journey. It sets up a scenario where you have multiple conflicting feelings about everything that's going on because you want to see the Emperor and the Harkonnens to be defeated, but the way in which it's happening there's so much deception tied into it, to which you're also opposed to what's happening. And it's just a movie that works on a lot of levels. It's thrilling, exciting, it's believable, it's challenging, it's thoughtful, and it does all of this at the same time. And so for me, this is just a great sci-fi film where they were able to pull off all this stuff. So without question, easily, no competition, it comes in at number one. If you enjoyed this video, I've talked about most of these movies before, whether in full reviews or rankings closer to when I initially saw them, like with Fantastic Fest. You can check that out in some of these other videos right over here in playlists and stuff like that. Hey, thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV.